No alien ever survived the pleasure trap until a human stepped inside. Now listen as the story begins. Jake's first sensation was pain. Not sharp, not immediate, more like the lingering echo of a dozen concussive blasts reverberating through his skull. His head throbbed as if he'd gone 10 brutal rounds with a heavyweight champion. Every breath felt like dragging barbed wire through his lungs. His eyelids, heavy as lead weights, resisted his attempts to pry them open. For a fleeting moment, he almost surrendered to the darkness. But years of special forces training had drilled a merciless reflex into him. Never give in when your body tells you to quit. With a guttural growl, Jake forced his eyes open. The world greeted him with light, strange, eerie, otherworldly light. It wasn't the warm gold of the sun or the sterile white of electric bulbs. Instead, blue luminescence pulsed in steady rhythms from crystalline veins embedded in smooth metallic walls. The glow rippled as though alive, as if the labyrinth itself was breathing. The chamber stretched wider than any aircraft hangar Jake had ever stood in the ceiling, soaring so high it vanished into an abyss of shadow. "What the hell?" Jake muttered, his voice cracked and rough like it hadn't been used in weeks. The sound of it seemed swallowed by the vast chamber, yet it drew attention nonetheless. As his vision sharpened, he realized he wasn't alone. Hundreds, no more than that, perhaps thousands of eyes stared back at him. Not human eyes, not even close. Faces of every imaginable shape, size, and texture filled the chamber. Insectoid mandibles clicked uneasily. Reptilian eyes narrowed into slits. Amphibian-like throats swelled and deflated with nervous gulps. Towering humanoids with skin like carved stone loomed over squat, fur-covered quadrupeds that twitched in anxious energy. The sight was so bizarre, so overwhelming, that Jake might have thought he was still dreaming, if not for the raw fear written across every alien face. They all shared the same expression he wore himself: confusion, disorientation, the creeping horror of realizing they were prisoners in some place far beyond comprehension. Jake instinctively ran a quick mental checklist, an old habit from his days in combat deployments. He was still in his dark gray t-shirt, tactical pants, and standard-issue military boots. A rapid pat-down confirmed the grim suspicion. No rifle slung across his back, no sidearm strapped to his thigh, no combat knife tucked into his boot. Naked in the sense that mattered most to a soldier, his body felt intact, though stiff muscles sluggish from disuse. A voice cut into his assessment. Finally, the human wakes. Jake turned sharply. Standing just a few feet away was a figure that at first glance looked almost human enough to unsettle him more than the insectoid horrors or the reptilian giants. She had the same bilateral symmetry, the same humanoid frame, but she radiated an alien elegance that made her unmistakably other. Her silver-white hair was tied high, cascading down like liquid starlight. Her eyes, in a natural arresting shade of violet, locked onto him with an intensity that pierced straight through his defenses. She wore an emerald green protective suit trimmed with bronze, sleek and functional hugging, an athletic body honed for combat. Everything about her screamed danger wrapped in beauty, lethal elegance incarnate. Jake rose slowly to his feet, muscles groaning in protest. "Name's Jake," he offered cautiously, voice still hoarse. The woman tilted her chin upward, regal and unyielding. "I am Tia of the 8th Clan." She said, her tone as sharp as a blade. She spoke as though the very syllables should impress him, as though uttering her lineage was an act of revelation. Jake blinked, unimpressed. "Right. Nice to meet you, Tia. Wherever the hell this is." Her eyes narrowed, the faintest flicker of irritation crossing her otherwise flawless features. "You don't even know who the Arits are, do you?" Jake shrugged. "Lady, I don't even know where I am. Your family tree isn't exactly top priority right now." Disgust flashed across her face. Typical human, limited perspective, limited knowledge. Before Jake could snap back with something appropriately sarcastic, the chamber itself interrupted. A deafening boom reverberated through the vast space, rattling his bones. The blue luminescence along the walls flared, pulsing brighter, casting harsh shadows. Then, without warning, a colossal holographic figure materialized at the chamber's center. It was tall, gaunt, and its limbs elongated and unnaturally thin, its face utterly featureless. The very sight of it pressed on Jake's instincts like a physical weight, tripping every survival alarm in his brain. Prisoners, the voice thundered, not from a mouth, for the hologram had none, but from everywhere and nowhere all at once. It resonated inside Jake's skull as much as in the air around him. You have been selected for the labyrinth of ascension. Many enter, none survive. Your deaths will serve a greater purpose. A wave of panic rippled across the alien crowd. Some hissed in terror. Others whimpered or growled. Jake heard Tia whisper sharply, her arrogance momentarily dissolved into fear of the Watchers. The most advanced civilization in the known universe. I thought they were myths. They look pretty damn real to me, Jake muttered, his soldier's pragmatism, refusing to indulge in legends. The holographic Watcher continued. The trials begin now. Survive, if you can. The floor trembled beneath them. Sections of the massive platform began to separate, slabs of metal and crystal grinding against one another. Entire chunks slid downward or rose upward, reshaping the flat chamber into something entirely different. Walls shot up like jagged teeth, splitting the crowd, isolating individuals, creating shifting corridors that twisted into an incomprehensible labyrinth. Move, Jake barked instinctively, grabbing Tia's arm as the ground tilted dangerously beneath them. She yanked away violently. Do not touch me, human. I need no help from your kind. Suit yourself, Jake shot back, already sprinting toward what looked like stable footing. The chamber erupted into chaos. Aliens scattered in every direction, some shrieking in terror, others shoving their way forward. A towering insectoid lost its balance and tumbled into a widening chasm, its scream cut short by the abyss. Smaller beings were trampled in the panic. The air filled with the cacophony of fear, desperation, and death. Jake vaulted over a rising wall, tucked his body into a roll, and came up running on the other side. Behind him, he heard a guttural curse, alien words he couldn't understand. But when he glanced back, he saw Tia leap the same obstacle with breathtaking grace, landing as lightly as a predator. Despite her earlier rejection, she was following him. You seem to know what you're doing, she admitted grudgingly, as they darted into a half-formed corridor wall still shifting around them. Basic survival instinct, Jake replied curtly, eyes scanning for threats. Something tells me we're going to need a hell of a lot more than that to get through this. A mechanical whirring sound filled the air, deepening his unease. From recessed compartments in the walls, metallic orbs emerged, floating ominously. Their surfaces gleamed with spinning blades that extended outward like the wings of grotesque insects. Seeker drones, Tia hissed, her violet eyes widening. They will tear us apart. As if responding to her fear, one drone shot forward, blades spinning at lethal speed. Jake reacted instantly, dropping flat to the ground and pulling Tia with him. The drone sliced through the space they had occupied a heartbeat earlier, the wind from its passage stinging Jake's face. I told you not to, she began furiously. You're welcome. Jake cut her off, rolling back onto his feet. Now run. Together they sprinted deeper into the newly formed maze. Drones gave chase, their ominous whirring growing louder, closer. Jake's mind snapped into tactical focus. He wasn't just running anymore, he was calculating escape routes, analyzing cover, considering choke points. This way, he barked, yanking Tia into a narrow passage. The walls sealed behind them, cutting off two of the drones. For the first time since they met, Tia looked at him with something other than contempt. Her lips curled in what might have been the ghost of respect. That was not entirely stupid, she admitted. Jake grinned, even as adrenaline thundered through his veins. High praise. I'll take it. But deep down, he knew this was just the beginning. The labyrinth was alive, shifting, testing, evolving. The Watchers were watching, evaluating every decision, every weakness, every flicker of ingenuity. Jake Mitchell, former soldier of Earth, had stumbled into the deadliest experiment in the galaxy, and he was determined to survive. The ground beneath Jake's boots felt untrustworthy, as though at any second it might dissolve into nothing. Every breath echoed strangely within the narrow corridor, carrying the metallic tang of ozone. The blue glow that pulsed along the walls cast eerie shadows that seemed to reach for him like spectral hands. Behind him, Tia's footsteps were light and precise, betraying none of the fear that flickered in her violet eyes. She moved like a predator, silent, efficient, yet Jake could feel the tension radiating from her arrow. The maze shifted again. A wall groaned, sliding sideways with grinding force. Another descended from above, nearly crushing them, until Jake shoved Tia forward and rolled after her just as it slammed shut. The sound reverberated like a tomb, sealing its occupants inside. Jake cursed under his breath. This place is a damn meat grinder. Tia shot him a sharp glance. It is worse. The labyrinth is not meant to test strength alone. It changes, adapts, corrects itself if the prey discovers a pattern. Every safe path becomes unsafe the next time you tread it. Great, Jake muttered, scanning their surroundings. So it cheats. Only from the perspective of one who expects fairness, Tia replied coldly. Jake's lips twitched into a grim smile. Then it's playing my game. War's never fair either. A sudden screech cut through their tense exchange. From the walls around them, panels slid open like yawning mouths. More seeker drones emerged, their rotors spinning, their blades gleaming wickedly in the pulsing light. This time there were not 2 or 3, but a dozen. Jake's gut tightened. Numbers always made things worse. Run, he barked, and together they bolted down the corridor, the drones surging after them in a swarm of mechanical fury. The sound was deafening, a metallic storm that rattled Jake's teeth. Sparks erupted as the drone's blades grazed the walls, showering the passage with deadly confetti. Tia sprinted just ahead, her movements graceful, almost superhuman. She vaulted over a rising panel, twisting midair to land with cat-like precision. Jake followed with less elegance but equal determination, slamming shoulder first into the ground and pushing back onto his feet without breaking stride. You are slower, she called back, breathless but taunting. Yeah, Jake panted. Still alive, though, aren't I? Her smirk lasted only a moment before another wall surged upward, cutting across their path. Jake grabbed her arm and pulled her sideways into a narrow gap just before the wall sealed. The drones slammed into the barrier with a metallic clang, their blades screeching against the surface. The reprieve was short-lived. The drones began to split, some peeling away to circle through other passages. Jake knew they'd be flanked if they stayed still. Keep moving, he ordered, though he wasn't sure why she listened. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe she already knew that for all her skill and knowledge, she needed him just as much as he needed her. They pushed deeper into the labyrinth, every step an exercise in vigilance. The walls shifted constantly, sometimes sliding slowly like tectonic plates, other times snapping into new positions with lethal suddenness. Once the floor dropped out from beneath them, revealing a yawning chasm. Jake managed to leap across, landing hard on his knees. He turned just in time to see Tia hesitate at the edge. Jump, he shouted. She launched herself across the gap, her form a silver blur. For a heart-stopping second, it looked like she wouldn't make it. Jake lunged forward, grabbing her wrist and hauling her up with a grunt of effort. She landed against him, breath hot against his ear. For a fleeting instant, her violet eyes softened. Then she pulled away, her pride reasserting itself. Do not think saving me makes you superior human. Jake smirked. Wouldn't dream of it. The maze gave them no time to dwell on the moment. The walls trembled again, shifting with unnerving speed. From somewhere distant, an alien scream rose and was abruptly cut off. The sound sent a chill down Jake's spine. He forced himself to keep moving, every sense attuned to survival. Hours, or what felt like hours, bled together in a blur of running, dodging, and evading. They passed the scattered remnants of other prisoners, a reptilian corpse shredded by drones, a shattered exoskeleton of an insectoid warrior, pools of blood in colors Jake had never seen before. The labyrinth showed no mercy, its design ruthlessly efficient at weeding out weakness. At one point, they stumbled into a chamber filled with spikes that jutted from the floor in irregular patterns. The spikes shifted like the keys of a piano, rising and falling unpredictably. To cross meant dancing with death. Tia stepped forward, confidently weaving through the spikes with uncanny precision. Jake followed more cautiously, relying on reflexes honed through years of military drills. Twice he almost misjudged, but both times he forced his body into rolls or leaps that narrowly saved him. By the time they reached the other side, his breath came in ragged gasps. Tia regarded him with a cool, assessing gaze. You adapt quickly. Most species would be dead by now. Jake wiped sweat from his brow. Good thing I'm not most species. They pressed onward, the corridors narrowing into claustrophobic tunnels. The walls pulsed faster here, the blue light almost frantic. Jake began to feel as though unseen eyes bored into his skull, studying him, analyzing every move. He clenched his fists, resisting the urge to lash out at the walls themselves. "You feel it too," Tia said quietly. Jake glanced at her. For once, there was no mockery in her voice, only unease. "Yeah," he admitted, "like rats in a lab." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "That is exactly what we are." Before Jake, before Jake could respond, the maze struck again. A section of the ceiling collapsed, shards of crystalline metal crashing down. Jake shoved Tia out of the way, taking a grazing cut across his arm. Blood-red human blood spattered across the glowing floor. The sight seemed to stir the labyrinth itself, the walls pulsing brighter, as though feeding on the violence. Tia's gaze flicked to his wound. Her expression wavered between disdain and something softer. "You bleed too easily." Jake barked a humorless laugh, and yet still breathing. Another screech of drones snapped their focus back to survival. This swarm was larger than the last, pouring into the corridor like a flood of spinning blades. Jake scanned, desperately searching for cover. His eyes landed on a narrow alcove half hidden by a jagged wall. "This way," he shouted, dragging Tia with him. They squeezed into the alcove just as the drones surged past their rotors, whipping the air into a frenzy. The alcove shook with the force of their passing, but mercifully the drones didn't detect them. For several long moments, Jake and Tia pressed shoulder to shoulder, breaths ragged, listening to the swarm fade into the distance. The proximity was unexpected, charged with tension neither wanted to name. Jake finally broke the silence. "This place is designed to break us. Not just physically, mentally. It wants us desperate, hopeless." Tia's eyes glimmered in the dim light. "Then it will be disappointed. I do not break easily." Jake met her gaze, his voice low but steady. "Neither do I." The maze shifted again, as if mocking their defiance. But for the first time since waking in this nightmare, Jake felt something flicker inside him. Not hope, not yet, but resolve. Whatever the Watchers wanted, whatever this labyrinth was built to accomplish, he refused to play their game by the rules. If survival meant cheating the system, then Jake Mitchell, soldier of Earth, was ready to cheat like hell. The labyrinth didn't rest. It shifted and changed with each heartbeat, grinding walls together, opening pits without warning, reshaping safe paths into lethal traps. To most, it was despair incarnate. To Jake, it was just another battlefield, except this one had no rules, no map, and no backup. Only instinct, grit, and the will to survive. Tia kept pace beside him, her movements so fluid she seemed to glide across the uneven terrain. Every leap she made was measured with precision, every dodge executed with a predator's grace. She wasn't just a warrior. She was born for this kind of arena. Yet even she glanced at Jake from time to time, her expression betraying a reluctant acknowledgement that he was still there, still alive. Hours bled together, marked only by near-death escapes and the constant hum of the blue glow. Somewhere behind the walls, the Watchers watched. Jake could feel it, eyes unseen, measuring every reaction, every decision. Rats in a cosmic maze, Tia had called them. At one point, they stumbled into a corridor where corpses littered the floor. Some were burned, others shredded, a few nothing more than pools of viscous ichor. The air stank of ozone and decay. Tia's jaw tightened. Jake's stomach clenched, though not from the gore he'd seen worse. It was the implication that gnawed at him. These beings had been strong, capable, maybe even brilliant, and they had all failed. "Still think your gods are invincible?" Jake asked quietly, eyes scanning the carnage. Tia shot him a glare. "The Watchers are not gods, but they are older, wiser, beyond what your primitive mind can comprehend." Jake knelt beside one of the fallen, a reptilian warrior with scarred scales and a massive frame. Its claws were blunted, worn from desperate battle. "Looks like they bleed and die just fine. Doesn't matter how advanced you are, everyone's mortal when the walls close in." She didn't reply, but she didn't argue either. The next trial came in the form of silence. They found themselves in a cavernous chamber where the walls had stopped shifting, where the oppressive grinding gave way to an eerie stillness. The floor was smooth, the air unnaturally still. For a moment, Jake almost relaxed. Then the blue light dimmed, flickered, and died. Darkness swallowed them whole. Stay close, Jake said instinctively, his voice low. He felt rather than saw Tia shift nearer. In the darkness, her presence was a comfort he hadn't expected. For several heartbeats, nothing happened. Then whispers slithered through the void. At first, Jake thought they were echoes of his own thoughts. But the voices grew clearer, sharper. He recognized the timbre of long-lost comrades, men who died in battle under his command. Why didn't you save us, Jake? We bled for you. And you lived. His chest tightened. He could almost see their faces in the dark, bloodied accusing. Beside him, Tia gasped. Her whispers were different alien voices. Words Jake couldn't understand, but the pain in her tone was unmistakable. Her violet eyes, faintly glowing in the dark, reflected horror. Jake forced his hand out, finding hers in the blackness. She flinched at first, but he tightened his grip. They're not real, he growled, fighting the weight of guilt pressing down on him. Don't let it in. Focus on me. Her hand trembled, then steadied. She squeezed back her strength, rallying. Together she whispered, her voice barely audible but fierce with determination. The whispers intensified, swirling into screams. The chamber shook with the weight of 1,000 remembered tragedies. Jake held fast, dragging Tia forward through the darkness. Each step was a battle against despair, but they pushed one heartbeat at a time until the light returned. When it did, the chamber had changed. The illusions evaporated like smoke, leaving behind only a pedestal in the center of the room. Upon it, glowing faintly, was a shard of crystal, another piece of the Watcher's puzzle. Tia exhaled slowly, her hand still entwined with his. Her violet eyes lingered on him. You anchored me. Jake smirked, though exhaustion lined his features. Guess I'm good for something after all. She released his hand reluctantly, as though aware of the significance. But the bond had been forged. Survival wasn't solitary anymore. Later, as they paused in a narrow corridor to catch their breath, Jake studied her more closely. You said the Watchers were myths. What else do your legends say? Talia leaned against the wall, her posture regal, even in fatigue. The Eric clan keeps records older than most civilizations. They speak of the Watchers as the first sentient beings in our galaxy, ancient beyond comprehension, shaping the stars long before any other race crawled into space. They study, always study. Labyrinths are their laboratories. We are their specimens. Jake grimaced. So we're just lab rats. Precisely. But why me? Why humans? You said they only pick advanced civilizations. Her eyes softened almost reluctantly. That is why I was surprised. Humans are young, primitive. To be chosen is unusual. Jake chuckled despite the grimness. Maybe they saw something in us you didn't. Her gaze traveled over him, lingering longer than necessary. Perhaps. The silence stretched heavy, but not uncomfortable. There was something charged in it, something Jake didn't dare name. Not yet. The bond between them was tested again soon after. The floor tilted sharply, sending Tia sliding toward a yawning pit lined with razor-like crystals. Jake acted without hesitation. He lunged, catching her wrist just before she went over. Muscles screaming, he hauled her up, his teeth gritted with effort. When she landed beside him, her violet eyes were wide with shock. For a moment, pride gave way to something raw and unguarded. Now we're even, Jake said, breath ragged. Tia stared at him for a long heartbeat, then nodded slowly. Perhaps I misjudged you. Jake. Hearing his name on her lips sent an unexpected thrill through him. He masked it with a grin. About damn time. For the first time, a flicker of a smile touched her lips. They pressed on. Every trap survived, every puzzle solved, every brush with death pulled them closer together. Their banter grew sharper but less hostile, the edges of contempt dulled by respect. Where once Tia had bristled at his touch, now she accepted his guidance without protest. Where once Jake saw her as just another arrogant alien, now he recognized the steel of her spirit, the fire in her eyes. The labyrinth wanted to break them down. Instead, it was binding them together. Jake realized it during a rare pause as they crouched in the shadow of a massive shifting wall. He glanced at her profile, silver hair, damp with sweat, jaw clenched in determination, violet eyes burning with resolve. Somewhere along the way, she had stopped being just another alien prisoner. She had become his partner, his equal, maybe even more. When the labyrinth shifted again, thrusting them forward into yet another trial, Jake didn't feel alone anymore. And in a place designed to devour the solitary, that bond might be the only thing that kept them alive. The next chamber announced itself with heat. Not the comfortable warmth of sunlight or the dry sting of desert air. This was oppressive, suffocating a furnace come alive. Jake felt it through the soles of his boots before he even stepped inside. The corridor opened into a vast circular room, its walls carved with alien glyphs that shimmered faintly in the blue glow. At the center stood a control panel, crystalline and metallic, covered in hundreds of shifting symbols. Tia's breath caught. A puzzle chamber. "Looks like a keyboard from hell," Jake muttered, stepping closer. She moved with reverence, fingers hovering just above the glowing glyphs. "This is Watcher cosmology. Each symbol represents a principal void creation. Order, chaos, entropy, rebirth. The sequence must be correct, or—" Her voice trailed off as the floor beneath them began to shimmer, radiating waves of heat. Already Jake could feel sweat forming on his brow. "Or we're toast," he finished grimly. Tia began, working her fingers dancing across the alien console with precision. She muttered to herself, arranging symbols in careful order: void, creation, order, case, entropy, rebirth. The panel flashed red. The floor grew hotter. "It should have worked," she hissed, frustration creeping into her tone. Jake crouched beside her, eyes scanning the panel. "Maybe you're looking at it straight on when you should be looking at it backward. Ever think of that?" She shot him a skeptical glance. "The Watchers do not design their trials for primitives with crude logic." "Yeah, well, maybe that's the problem." He pointed to the mirrored reflection on the polished wall. The symbols reversed themselves there like a cosmic joke. "Try it backward. Mirror test." Reluctantly, she followed his suggestion. Void, rebirth, entropy, chaos, order, creation. The panel glowed red again. Jake grimaced. The floor was nearly unbearable now, his boots beginning to smoke. He thought fast, brain flipping through options like flashcards. When standard procedures fail, you adapt. When adaptation fails, you cheat. "Stand back," he ordered, kneeling by the base of the console. "What are you doing?" Tia demanded. He ignored her. Running his hands along the base, he found a thin seam and access point. With a grunt, he pried it open, revealing a tangled nest of circuitry. Sparks crackled faintly. "This is madness," Tia said sharply. "You cannot possibly—" "Don't need to understand it," Jake interrupted. "Electronics are like people. Poke them in the right spot, and they'll do something." Before she could stop him, he crossed two wires. The panel sparked violently, plunging the room into silence. For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then with a grinding roar, the far wall slid open, revealing an exit. The heat dissipated almost instantly. Jake stood, brushing soot from his hands with a triumphant grin. "See, sometimes brute force beats brains." Tia stared at him, violet eyes wide with disbelief, and though she tried to hide it, admiration. "That is not how the trials are meant to be solved." "Got us through, didn't it?" She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "You continue to surprise me, Jacob Earth." Something in the way she said his name sent a shiver through him. The respite didn't last long. The next chamber tested their bodies instead of their minds. It was a gauntlet of swinging blades, shifting platforms, and shifting gravity fields that threw them against the walls without warning. Jake moved like a soldier on an obstacle course, every muscle burning with effort, instincts honed from years of drills kicking in. Tia was his equal, her alien agility allowing her to weave between traps with almost balletic grace. More than once they saved each other, Jake pulling her back from a collapsing ledge, Tia shoving him aside as a blade scythed downward. Each act of survival bound them closer, an unspoken rhythm forming between them. When they finally collapsed behind a safe wall, drenched in sweat and gasping for breath, Jake let out a low whistle. Hell of a workout. Tia's lips curved into a faint smile. "Perhaps your species is not as fragile as I thought." Jake chuckled. "Careful, sounds like a compliment." Her gaze lingered on him, softer now, almost vulnerable. "Perhaps it is." Their fragile bond deepened further when disaster struck. A section of ceiling collapsed and jagged shards rained down. Tia shoved Jake clear, but a shard slashed across her thigh. She staggered, silver blue blood flowing freely. Jake dropped to his knees beside her, tearing a strip from his t-shirt to bind the wound. Hold still. You need not, she began, but her voice caught as his hands pressed firmly against the injury. Her breathing quickened, her fingers clutching his shoulder with surprising strength. Her back arched slightly as he worked, and a faint blush colored her cheeks. Sorry, Jake muttered, though he suspected the reaction wasn't entirely from pain. Do not be, she whispered, her violet eyes locking onto his. For a moment, the labyrinth faded away. There was only the heat of their bodies, the charged silence between them, the undeniable truth of survival forging something deeper. Then distant sounds broke the spell, screams metallic clattering. The maze never allowed peace for long. Jake tied off the makeshift bandage and stood offering her his hand. Come on, we're not done yet. She took it without hesitation. Hours later, as they rested in a sheltered alcove, Tia finally spoke. Among my people touched during injury, it carries meaning. Our bodies release chemicals, form bonds. To treat a wound is to claim responsibility for the life that follows. Jake blinked. So, what I just signed us up for some kind of alien marriage contract? Her cheeks flushed deeper, though her voice remained steady. Not marriage, but a bond, a connection neither can ignore. Jake leaned back, letting out a low laugh. Guess that makes us partners now. Partners, she repeated softly as if testing the word. The trials continued. Some tested logic riddles etched into shifting walls requiring quick thinking. Others tested endurance corridors filled with crushing pressure that forced them to crawl, lungs burning. Through it all, Jake's unconventional tactics kept them alive. When a corridor filled with toxic gas, he used his torn shirt as a crude filter. When walls closed in, he jammed his boot between the plates to buy precious seconds. Each time, Tia watched him with growing respect. She began to ask him questions, not about his species' technology, but about him, his training, his past, the wars he'd fought. He answered honestly, though he spared her the darkest details. In turn, she told him of Ereth, her homeworld. Silver spires that touched the sky, twin suns that painted the land in lavender light, a clan culture steeped in honor and tradition. Her voice softened as she spoke of it, eyes distant with longing. Jake listened, captivated. For the first time, he realized just how much she'd lost by being trapped here, and how much she risked by trusting him. Their partnership was sealed during the most brutal trial yet. The floor dropped away, leaving only a series of narrow beams suspended over a pit of seething energy. Crossing meant balancing on razor-thin edges, while the labyrinth hurled gusts of wind to knock them off. Tia went first, her body poised and elegant, every step measured. Jake followed, less graceful but stubborn. Midway, the beams began to tilt. Tia lost her footing, slipping with a startled cry. Without thinking, Jake threw himself forward, catching her hand as she dangled over the abyss. Muscles straining, he hauled her back onto the beam. They collapsed together, her body pressed against his breaths, ragged. Now we're really even, he gasped. Her laugh was shaky but genuine. You are insufferable. But she didn't let go of his hand. By the time they staggered out of the trial chambers, bruised and battered, but alive, something fundamental had shifted. The labyrinth had tested their minds, their bodies, and their trust. Against all odds, they had passed. And in the process, Jake Mitchell and Tia of the A-Take clan were no longer just strangers thrown together by fate. They were bound by survival, by sacrifice, by the spark of something greater than either of them had expected. In the heart of a death trap designed to destroy them, a bond had been forged that might just carry them through the horrors still to come. The corridors had grown quieter but not safer. The hum of shifting walls remained constant, though now it was punctuated by something new: voices. Not panicked screams or death cries. These were measured, rhythmic, almost ritualistic. Jake motioned for silence. Tia froze beside him, every line of her body taut with wariness. Together they crept forward, hugging the jagged wall until the passage opened into a wide chamber. What they saw made Jake pause in disbelief. 24 aliens moved in procession, their steps perfectly in sync. At their head marched a tall reptilian figure, his green scales scarred with intricate patterns that glowed faintly in the blue light. In his clawed hand, he carried a crude staff fashioned from scavenged metal, its top crowned with a shard that pulsed ominously. Behind him trailed others, insectoid beings with carved symbols etched into their exoskeletons, humanoids with skin dyed in strange patterns. Quadrupeds bowed low as if in submission. Their eyes were hollow, their movements mechanical, as though every shred of individuality had been stripped away. "Occult," Jake muttered under his breath. "The Dominion," Atia corrected, her voice edged with disgust. "I've heard whispers of them. Survivors who surrender their will to hierarchy. The strong rule, the weak serve. They worship the labyrinth itself." Jake watched as one straggler stumbled. The reptilian leader jabbed his staff into the alien's side, snarling in guttural tones. The victim whimpered, scrambled back into line. "Charming," Jake said grimly. "We should avoid them," Tia urged. "They are predators of the desperate." But before they could retreat, the leader's head snapped toward them. His vertical pupils dilated as he raised his staff. The procession halted as one. "New blood," the reptilian hissed. His voice slithered like a blade across stone. "The labyrinth delivers more offerings." Jake instinctively stepped in front of Tia, shoulders squared. "We're just passing through. We don't want trouble." The leader's scaled lips curled into something like a smile. None passed through Dominion territory without tribute or trial. Around them, the circle closed. Weapons fashioned from scavenged debris glinted in the glow. Jake counted at least 20 enemies. His fists clenched, but he knew brute force wouldn't win this fight. Then, as if on cue, his watch beeped. Jake glanced down. The display, normally nothing more than a tactical chronometer, now pulsed with strange patterns. A crude map of the labyrinth shimmered across its cracked surface. The reptilian leader recoiled. Murmurs rippled through the Dominion. "The human bears the mark of the Watchers," one whispered. Tia's hand tightened on Jake's arm. "Let them believe," she whispered urgently. "It may be our only advantage." Jake hesitated, then straightened, projecting authority he didn't feel. "The Watchers speak through my device," he said firmly. "They show me the path to the center." Gasps rippled through the Dominion. The leader studied him intently, then lowered his staff slightly. "Perhaps you are chosen, but even the chosen must prove themselves. You will undergo the rite of passage. Only then will we acknowledge you." Jake's gut twisted. "And if we refuse, then you die here feeding the labyrinth, as countless others have." Tia's voice was sharp. "What is this rite?" The leader's forked tongue flicked between jagged teeth. "The chamber of echoes. You will enter. You will retrieve the key of ascension. If you survive, you may pass. If not—" His grin widened. "The labyrinth claims you." Before Jake could argue, the Dominion surged forward, shoving him and Tia toward a dark tunnel that opened in the wall. The smell of ozone and decay wafted from within. Jake glanced at Tia. "Ever get the feeling we're walking into a trap?" "Always," she said grimly, and together they stepped into the darkness. The tunnel led to a vast circular chamber unlike any they had seen. The walls were utterly black, absorbing every trace of the blue glow. At the center stood a pedestal upon which rested a crystalline object that shimmered faintly. "The key," Tia whispered. Jake's instinct screamed, "Too easy." The moment they stepped forward, the darkness stirred. Shadows slithered along the walls, coalescing into shapes. The air chilled heavy with dread. Then the whispers began. This time Jake recognized the voices instantly. His dead comrades. The ones who'd bled out in deserts and jungles while he lived. Their faces materialized in the shadows, hollow-eyed and accusing. "You left us to die, Jake. You saved yourself." His chest tightened, guilt stabbing like knives. His hand trembled, reaching out unconsciously. Beside him, Tia gasped. Shadows swirled into forms of her own nightmares. Her clans shattered her people, slaughtered her homeworld, burning under Watcher fire. She stumbled, knees buckling. Jake snapped out of his daze and grabbed her hand. "Don't listen. They're lies." Tears shimmered in her violet eyes. "It feels real." "I know," he said fiercely, "but we face it together." The shadows pressed closer, their whispers deafening. Jake grit his teeth, dragging Tia toward the pedestal. Every step was agony, memories clawing at his mind, but he refused to stop. Finally, they reached the key. Up close, it pulsed with inner light, almost alive. Jake hesitated. "Feels like a trap." "Everything here is a trap," Tia replied, her grip tightening. He reached out. The moment his fingers brushed the crystal, the shadows screamed and lunged. But the key flared brilliantly, blasting them back. The chamber shook violently. When the light faded, only one key remained in his grasp. The other, an illusion, dissolved into smoke. Tia exhaled in relief, her shoulders trembling. "You chose correctly." Jake managed a grim smile, human intuition. When they emerged from the Chamber of Echoes, clutching the key of ascension, the Dominion greeted them with shock and awe. The reptilian leader's eyes gleamed. "You succeeded," he admitted grudgingly. "Perhaps you truly are chosen." Tia stepped forward, her voice strong despite exhaustion. "He is. His kind possesses unique abilities." The Watchers underestimated them. The Dominion murmured amongst themselves, torn between reverence and envy. Jake simply tightened his grip on the key. He'd survived another trial, but the labyrinth wasn't finished. And neither were the Watchers. That night, in a secluded alcove where the Dominion allowed them to rest, Jake and Tia sat close, their bodies still humming from the ordeal. Tia broke the silence first. "You saw them, didn't you? The ones you lost?" Jake's jaw tightened. "Yeah, they never let you forget." Her hand brushed his. "Among my people, we say those who walk with us in memory never truly leave." But in that chamber, it felt like being torn apart. He met her gaze, violet eyes shining softly in the glow. "We held on. That's what matters." For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, the bond between them deeper than words. The labyrinth was breaking others, but it was forging them. The Dominion left them behind at the edge of another twisting corridor, their chants echoing like a fading hymn. For a while, Jake and Tia moved in silence, both aware that surviving the rite of passage had changed how the others saw them. Chosen. That was the word the Dominion used. Jake hated it. He'd never asked to be chosen for anything. But as the labyrinth shifted around them again, the word clung like a shadow. The walls pulsed brighter, as though the labyrinth itself acknowledged his new status. The blue glow deepened to indigo, humming with strange energy. Jake's watch beeped, showing signals moving across the labyrinth map, red dots converging on their location. Tia stiffened. "Those are not seekers." Before Jake could ask, the sound came. A high-pitched whine, sharp and predatory, like a swarm of wasps amplified through steel. From recessed alcoves in the walls emerged machines unlike the clunky seekers they had faced before. Sleeker, larger, their surfaces gleamed silver with edges too sharp to be ornamental. Weapons protruded from their arms, plasma projectors, saw-like blades, in something that looked horrifyingly like a net launcher. "Hunter drones," Tia said grimly. "The elite enforcers of the Watchers." The drones hovered for a moment, scanning. Beams of green light passed over Tia, then turned harmlessly away. When they swept across Jake, they flared red. "Target identified," a metallic voice droned. "Human specimen, priority acquisition." Jake's gut dropped. "Why me?" "Because you are the anomaly," Tia whispered, her eyes wide. "They want you alive." The drone surged forward. "Move," Jake shouted. They bolted down the corridor, the hunters gliding behind them with terrifying precision. Energy blasts scorched the walls, spraying molten fragments across their path. Jake ducked low, dragging Tia with him as a beam sliced overhead. The labyrinth itself seemed to conspire with their pursuers. Floors tilted, walls slammed shut, corridors forked into confusing paths. Jake tapped his watch desperately, and once again the labyrinth stuttered, freezing momentarily. A side passage appeared. There he barked, pulling Tia through. The drones howled electronically, recalibrating, but the delay bought them precious seconds. They sprinted into a dome-shaped chamber. The entrance sealed behind them, cutting off pursuit. For a moment, silence reigned. Jake leaned against the wall, chest heaving. That was too close. Tia's breathing was ragged, her silver hair plastered to her face with sweat. "They will not stop. They know what you are now." "And what am I?" Jake asked bitterly. "Some lab rat with a fancy stopwatch?" Her gaze softened. "No, something more. Perhaps the very thing the Watchers feared most." Before Jake could reply, Tia stumbled. He caught her, instantly lowering her to the floor. The makeshift bandage on her thigh was soaked through silver-blue blood, seeping heavily. The wound pulsed with a sickly purple discoloration. "Poison," Jake muttered grimly. Her lips pressed tight. The labyrinth ensures no one survives long enough to reach the center. Jake's mind raced. He remembered the vial the Dominion leader had pressed into his hand. He pulled it from his pocket, a small container filled with glowing liquid. Verse said this would neutralize the toxins. Tia examined it warily. "Myarian extract. It will help, but it has other properties." Jake frowned. "Other properties?" A faint blush touched her cheeks. It heightened sensation. Among my people, it is sometimes used intimately. Jake blinked, then barked a short laugh despite the danger. Hell of a side effect. Her violet eyes glimmered with both pain and amusement. Use it anyway, or the wound will spread. He uncorked the vial and applied it carefully. The glow seeped into her skin, and almost instantly the discoloration faded. But Tia's reaction was immediate. Her breathing quickened, her hand clutching his arm tightly. When his fingers brushed her wound to secure the bandage, she gasped back, arching. Jake froze. "Sar, don't," she whispered, eyes locking onto his. "It is not unwelcome." The air between them thickened, charged. For days they had run, fought, bled side by side. Every moment had built toward this one, a collision of survival and longing. Jake felt the heat in his veins, the undeniable pull. He leaned closer. "Tia," her lips parted. "Show me how humans express bonds." Their mouths met. At first tentative, then fierce, their kiss ignited like fire in the cold labyrinth. Differences in physiology and culture and species, none of it mattered. The connection was raw, undeniable, forged in blood and fire. They moved together, urgency born of mortality. In that sealed chamber, with the hunters prowling just beyond, they surrendered to something greater than survival. For a time, there was no labyrinth, no watchers, no death. Only Jake and Tia, bound by something neither had expected to find. When it was over, they lay together, breath mingling, skin damp with sweat. Tia traced patterns on his chest with her fingertip, her smile both mischievous and tender. "Your people have surprising techniques," she murmured. Jake chuckled, pulling her close. "Just another earth trick." Her laughter was soft, musical, and for the first time since waking in this nightmare, Jake felt something like peace. But the labyrinth didn't allow peace for long. His watch beeped sharply, the display flaring with new symbols. A path lit up across the map, leading deeper into the maze. At the same time, the key he carried pulsed brighter, glowing in sync with the watch. Tia sat up, eyes wide. "The key has activated. Our energies, combined perhaps." Jake blinked. "You're saying—" She smirked faintly. "It seems even the labyrinth recognizes our bond." Jake groaned, half amused, half exasperated. "Great, even alien death traps ship us now." But his humor masked a sobering truth. The path ahead would only grow harder. And now the watchers weren't just observing, they were hunting him specifically. Jake stood, pulling Tia to her feet. "Come on, the way's open." But we move together, always. She laced her fingers with his, her violet eyes fierce. Together. The labyrinth did not welcome their advance. As they pressed on, the walls changed from stone-like crystal to gleaming metallic surfaces veined with circuitry. The air buzzed faintly with power. They were entering the heart of the machine. Hunter drones stalked them at every turn. Jake's watch bought them precious moments of reprieve, freezing walls or forcing doors open, but each use seemed riskier, the labyrinth's systems resisting more aggressively. Once a drone cornered them in a narrow corridor. Jake had no weapons but his fists and ingenuity. He jammed his watch into the drone's sensor, triggering a feedback loop that sent it spiraling into the wall in a burst of sparks. Tia stared at him in astonishment. "You continue to bend their technology in ways I thought impossible," she said breathlessly. Jake grinned. "That's humanity's specialty. We break what's unbreakable." She shook her head, though admiration glimmered in her eyes. "Perhaps that is why the Watchers fear you." They moved on, bruised, exhausted, but together. Every trap survived, every drone evaded, every brush with death only tightened their bond. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was a promise: if one fell, the other would fight like hell to pull them back. And as the labyrinth's core loomed ahead, glowing with ominous light, Jake realized something profound. He hadn't just found an ally in Tia. He had found someone worth surviving for. The air grew heavy the deeper they went, charged with static that prickled against Jake's skin. The walls no longer resembled stone or crystal, but smooth metallic surfaces laced with glowing circuitry, like veins of light pulsing in sync with some unseen heartbeat. Tia's eyes swept the corridor, her face grim. "We've reached the core systems. This is where the labyrinth becomes pure technology." Jake tapped his watch. The display flared with dozens of red dots converging on their position, and where the welcome committee's already waiting. The warning came as a shrill metallic screech. From recesses in the walls emerged sleek silver drones, far deadlier than the seekers they had fought earlier. Unlike the others, these carried multiple weapons, plasma rifles, mounted on articulated arms, spinning blades, even whip-like energy tendrils. Hunter drones, Tia breathed, but more advanced, the Watcher's elite enforcers. The drones paused their sensor scanning. When the beams passed over Tia, they glowed green. When they swept across Jake, they blazed crimson. Target identified, a mechanical voice intoned, "Human specimen, priority acquisition." Jake's stomach sank. "Yeah, I've heard that before." The drones attacked. They ran. Blasts of searing plasma scorched the metallic floor inches from their feet. Jake yanked Tia behind him as an energy whip lashed the wall, sending shards raining down. His watch beeped wildly, displaying a side passage. There he shouted, dragging her through just as drones flooded the corridor. The passage led to a small, dome-shaped chamber. The moment they entered, the entrance sealed shut behind them. The walls lit with a strange violet glow humming with alien energy. "Shielded," Jake realized, panting. "They can't scan us in here. For now, at least." Tia sank to the floor, clutching her injured leg. The wound had worsened despite the extract. The discoloration crawled higher along her thigh, spreading like venom. Jake knelt beside her, pulling out the vial Ver had given him. "Here, this should neutralize it." She examined it and gave a small, knowing smile. "Myrian extract. Yes, it will heal the toxin, but it carries other effects." Jake frowned. "You mean the enhancing sensations thing?" Her blush deepened, but she nodded. "Among my people, it is sometimes used during intimate bonding." Jake's face heated. "Hell of a time for that." "Use it," she insisted, "or I won't make it to the Nexus." He applied the substance, watching the purple discoloration recede. But her reaction was immediate. Her breath hitched her grip on his arm, tightening, a soft gasp escaping her lips. Jake froze. "Sorry." Her violet eyes locked onto his. "Don't be. It is not unwelcome." The tension between them already simmering since the chamber of echoes ignited. Jake's heart pounded, his body drawn irresistibly to hers. She leaned in, whispering, "Show me how humans seal bonds." Their lips met, fierce and desperate. In the midst of death in machines, they found life. The labyrinth faded away, leaving only Jake and Tia bound by something no watcher could quantify. When it was over, they lay tangled together, breathless. Tia traced circles on his chest, her smile soft and mischievous. "Your techniques, surprising," she murmured. Jake chuckled. "Just another Earth trick." But their respite ended quickly. His watch beeped sharply, glowing brighter than ever. The map updated, highlighting a new path leading straight to the labyrinth's center. At the same time, the crystalline key pulsed in sync. Tia sat up, eyes wide. "The key has awakened. Perhaps our energies combined triggered it." Jake groaned. "So the alien death maze officially ships us now. Perfect." Still, he pocketed the key, his jaw set. "Let's finish this." The path led them to a vast chamber unlike any before. The ceiling arched high overhead, reflecting a vision of the cosmos, stars, nebulae, galaxies swirling in impossible detail. At the center rose a platform surrounded by consoles glowing with alien symbols. "The antechamber to the Nexus," Tia whispered in awe. "Few have ever seen it." Jake's military instinct screamed warning. Too easy. As if in response, alarms blared. Red lights pulsed. Panels slid open around the perimeter, revealing humanoid machines taller than men, their silver bodies gleaming, their featureless faces blank. Tia gasped. "Sentinels, the Watcher's guardians." The Sentinels moved with terrifying grace, surrounding them instantly. One step forward, voice cold. "Human specimen will be contained for study. Alien companion expendable." Energy nets shot out, ensnaring Tia. She cried out as currents crackled through her body, her muscles locking in agony. "Tia!" Jake roared, lunging forward. Two sentinels blocked him, their strength overwhelming. One seized his arm, the grip like iron. Desperation surged. Jake slammed the crystalline key against the sentinel's chest. A burst of energy exploded, shorting out the machine. It collapsed in a smoking heap. Jake ripped free, charging toward Tia. "Find the Nexus," she cried through gritted teeth as the sentinels dragged her toward a wall panel. "It's our only chance." Jake fought furiously, but more sentinels swarmed. He watched helplessly as Tia was pulled through the wall, her violet eyes blazing with defiance rather than fear. Then she was gone. Alone, Jake's rage boiled. He'd lost comrades before, men and women he couldn't save. But he refused to lose Tia, not now. His watch beeped frantically, its display shifting. Not just the labyrinth map now, but schematics, internal systems of the labyrinth itself. A realization struck like lightning. Timing, Jake whispered. It's all about timing. He pressed a combination of the buttons, the same reset sequence he'd used on countless missions when the watch glitched. The device emitted a piercing tone. The sentinels faltered, their heads tilting as if confused. The consoles around the platform lit up, responding to the watch's signal. The dome above spun faster, colors shifting violently. Unauthorized access detected, the mechanical voice blared. System override in progress. Jake didn't hesitate. He vaulted onto the platform, slamming the key into a central slot. The entire chamber shook. The consoles flared, displaying schematics of the labyrinth, with every prisoner marked as glowing dots. He spotted Tia's signal in a holding cell deep below. Others dotted the maze, hundreds of survivors still trapped. "Come on," he muttered, pulling wires from a downed sentinel and jury-rigging them into the console. He connected his watch, creating a hybrid interface. The display merged, showing both human numbers and alien glyphs. His fingers flew. He bypassed systems he barely understood, relying on instinct and a lifetime of improvisation. Doors opened across the labyrinth. Barriers fell. Traps deactivated. The map lit up with moving dots, prisoners rushing toward freedom. An alarm screamed louder. Primary systems compromised. Containment protocols engaged. The floor shuddered. A circular section retracted, revealing a swirling vortex of energy beneath the platform. "The Nexus," Jake breathed. A voice cut through the chaos. "Jake!" He spun. Tia stood at one of the entrances, bracing the closing door with sheer strength. Relief flooded him. "I thought I lost you." "It takes more than toys to keep me," she gritted, forcing the door wider. She staggered toward him, her body battered but unbroken. He caught her as the chamber trembled violently. The vortex pulsed, its depths showing glimpses of countless realities. Worlds thriving, worlds burning versions of themselves in infinite permutations. Tia's eyes widened in awe. They study not just us, but all possible versions of us. Jake tightened his grip on her hand. "Then let's give them one outcome they'll never forget." Together they approached the Nexus. The key in the console blazed the vortex, roaring like a cosmic storm. The Watcher's voice echoed in every direction. "Unauthorized. Human interference detected. Containment priority eliminate." Panels opened, releasing more sentinels, dozens this time. Jake looked at Tia. "No more running." She drew herself tall despite her injuries, her violet eyes fierce. Together. They fought side by side, Jake using every earth trick, every ounce of training. Tia moved like fire and steel, her blade flashing, her body weaving through attacks. Yet the sentinels were endless, their strength overwhelming. Finally, Jake slammed his watch into the console one last time. "Come on, you stubborn piece of junk." The device shrieked, fusing with the alien system. The vortex stabilized, locking coordinates. He grabbed Tia's hand, now or never. As sentinels lunged, they leapt into the Nexus. Light consumed them. They fell through eternity, wrapped in a cocoon of energy. Jake held Tia close as reality bent and broke around them, galaxies spinning in every direction. Then with a sensation like breaking water, they emerged. Jake gasped, blinking at a lavender sky with twin suns blazing overhead. Before them stretched a breathtaking city of spires and bridges that defied gravity, glowing with golden light. Tia's breath caught. "Wraith, my homeworld." Jake turned to her in awe. "We made it." She smiled, eyes glistening. Together. The lavender sky stretched endlessly above them, bathed in the glow of twin suns that painted the world in hues of gold and violet. Jake stood frozen on the plateau, staring at the impossible city below. Aerith, the capital of Tia's people, was a dream of light and structure. Spires twisting toward the heavens, like living metal bridges, arching gracefully across chasms and towers woven with vines that shimmered with bioluminescent glow. Vehicles hummed silently through the air, weaving precise patterns above the streets. Jake had seen cities rise from deserts in his deployments, but nothing on Earth compared to this. For the first time since the labyrinth, Awe softened the edges of his exhaustion. Beside him, Tia's violet eyes shone with tears. I never thought I would see it again. Jake squeezed her hand gently. Then let's make it count. Arrival in the city. The journey to the city took hours. As they descended from the plateau, citizens paused to watch their silver hair catching the sunlight like strands of starlight. Some gasped at Tia, their eyes widening in disbelief. Others fixed suspicious gazes on Jake, whispering behind their hands. Tia leaned closer. No human has ever walked these streets. They will see you as both curiosity and threat. Jake smirked faintly. Story of my life. Still, he kept his chin high as they approached a complex near the city's center, marked with insignias Jake recognized from Tia's armor. Guards straightened as she approached, eyes widening. Sentinel Tia of the Nyrath returns, one announced, disbelief threading his voice. You were lost to the void. I was taken by the Watchers, she replied formally. And I have returned with proof their labyrinth is real. The guard's gaze slid warily to Jake and this creature. Jake straightened, meeting the guard's eyes squarely. Name's Jake Mitchell, and I didn't just survive that labyrinth, I broke it. The guards exchanged uneasy glances, then allowed them entry. Before the elders, they were led into a circular chamber where elders of the Nyrath clan sat in quiet deliberation. Silver hair braided in elaborate styles, robes glowing with subtle circuitry, they radiated authority born of centuries. All conversation ceased when Tia entered. One elder rose, his eyes wide. Tia, child, we mourned you as lost. She bowed deeply. I was taken by the Watchers. Their labyrinth was no myth. It exists, and it is more terrible than our legends foretold. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Then their eyes shifted to Jake. And this being one elder, asked, skepticism sharp. Jake stepped forward. Jake Mitchell, human, former Special Forces Earth. And before you ask, yes, I survived your labyrinth of death. Not by luck, not by miracle, by outthinking it. The eldest narrowed his eyes. How could a primitive human achieve what the greatest minds of our galaxy could not? Jake reached into his pocket and pulled out his battered military watch. He held it up for all to see. With this, he said simply, a standard-issue Earth device. To you, it's crude, but it disrupted their systems, hacked into their controls. Sometimes the simplest tools work best. One elder scoffed, impossible. But Tia stepped forward. I witnessed it. The Watcher's technology, built on principles of resonance and dimensional manipulation, could not anticipate something as simple as human ingenuity. This man freed not only me, but hundreds of prisoners across the galaxy. Her voice rang with conviction, echoing across the chamber. Jake felt pride stir in his chest, not for himself, but for the way she spoke of him. The eldest elder leaned back, his expression contemplative. Perhaps there is wisdom in simplicity. Perhaps we have become so advanced we forgot how to see the obvious. Recognition and sanctuary. Hours passed as Jake and Tia recounted their journey, the Dominion, the hunter drones, the Chamber of Echoes, and finally the Nexus. The elders listened with growing astonishment. At last, Elder Ka, the oldest among them, spoke. This human's actions reveal something we have long ignored. Adaptability, creativity, qualities that cannot be measured in equations. Perhaps that is why the Watchers fear him. He turned to Jake. You will be granted sanctuary among the Nyrath. Tia will serve as your guide. In exchange, you will share with us the ways of your people. Jake inclined his head, surprised by the gravity of the moment. I'll give what I can, but understand this, humans don't have all the answers. We just find ways when no one else can. Elder K's lips curved faintly. That may be the greatest answer of all. The balcony moment. Later that evening, Tia led Jake to a balcony overlooking the city. Bioluminescent lights glowed across the streets, casting everything in hues of violet and gold. So Tia asked softly, leaning against the railing, how does it feel to be the most exotic being on an entire planet? Jake laughed. Overwhelming, but exciting too. He turned to her, his voice dropping. What happens now between us, I mean? Tia's gaze softened. Among my people, bonds forged in survival are sacred, stronger than any ceremony. What we shared in the labyrinth would be honored here. Jake reached for her hand, drawing her close. Good, because because I didn't hack an interdimensional portal just to say goodbye. Her laughter rang like music under the twin suns. She leaned into him, her forehead pressing against his in the intimate gesture of her people. Rising fame and new threats. In the weeks that followed, Jake became more than an outsider. He became a symbol. His unorthodox problem-solving, his earthborn improvisations baffled 80 engineers, but often worked better than their advanced systems. Soon whispers spread beyond Aerith. Representatives from other worlds arrived eager to meet the human who had escaped the inescapable labyrinth. But peace was fragile. Reports came of Watcher vessels appearing at the edges of OE space. Their probes tested defenses seeking cracks. Jake worked tirelessly with Tia and her clan to prepare. He blended human grit with AT technology, laying traps, creating redundancies, even repurposing ancient weapons the Eight had long dismissed as outdated. When the first Watcher probe attacked Aerith's defenses held, the city cheered. For the first time in centuries, the Watchers had been repelled. A gift and a promise. One evening, as they stood together on the same balcony where Jake had first confessed his fears, Tia presented him with a device sleek, glowing with faint runes. "The Council has approved an expedition," she explained. "This will allow communication with Earth. Soon your people may know the truth. We will extend protection. Humanity will have allies among the stars." Jake stared at it in wonder. "I never thought I'd see home again." Tia tilted her head, violet eyes searching his. "Are you having second thoughts about staying here?" Jake pulled her close, his voice rough. "Not for a second. But now I can show you Earth someday. Terrible coffee, worse politics, the best music in the galaxy." Her lips curved into a smile. "I look forward to it. Though I suspect your people will be as amazed by you as mine have been, the human who outsmarted the Watchers with a wristwatch." Jake laughed, shaking his head. "Wait until they hear about the rest of my sneaky Earth tricks." Epilogue: Humanity's Place. Night fell over Aerith, twin moons rising above the radiant city. Jake and Tia stood side by side, watching the lights shimmer like stars brought to the ground. He thought of where he had started, waking in that chamber surrounded by strangers with nothing but his training and a battered watch. Now he was no longer just a survivor. He was a bridge between Earth and the stars, between fear and hope, between himself and the woman at his side. No one had ever escaped the death labyrinth before. But then no one had ever tried a sneaky Earth trick.